Hi, I'm Judy from Coffee, Cookies, and Books, and today I'm going to share with you everything that I read in the month of February. Wonderful to see you again. I have a few things that I just want to quickly go over before I get into the reviews of all the books that I read in February. We're going to talk first quickly about all of the readathons that I am participating in. I have a few that are going to go with me through the rest of the year, and one special one that is affecting what I'm going to read in March. So we'll go over that one actually first. So first, I wanted to mention the REALMATHON, Readathon, REALMATHON 4.0, created by Covers by Cassidy. I have linked everything below for sure, but this is my TBR for March, and it contained 25 books. I don't plan on reading all 25. Initially, I think there were 3 books, which are the 3 that are the very bottom right corner. There's My Every Breath, Corrupt, and The Veiled Kingdom. Those 3 are ebooks that I just added on to give me a few extra ebooks. So I think I have about 6 or 7 ebooks to go in conjunction with everything else, because I read through the ebooks pretty quick, and most of them are not super long. So I've just added a few extra. So that is my tentative TBR. The ones that are across the very top, those are the ones that I'm going to read for sure, 100%, second row. So as they go down, they become less dominant on the March reading list. Now, I did want to mention that anything that I do not read from these 25 in March is going to flow into April. So this TBR is going to continue with me into April. And then depending on how many books I have left, we could just add a few. I will go over all of that again when I do the April's TBR, but those are going to technically go with me. So then the other readathon that I am participating in is the Buzzword readathon. And as things stand, so we have the Buzzword cover challenge. So last month, I read the first 2 books, which were for January and February. So they're going to be part of this review. And then coming up in March, I have chosen 3 books from this list. So first of all, the March book, which is Bookshops and Bone Dust, and Death by Fire and Caliban's War from June and July are going on my March list. So the reason that they're going on is because with the REALMATHON, you get points for specific aspects of your book for you to add to your team or take away from another team. So I have selected specific books based on their content. So that's the case with the Buzzword Cover Challenge. The other Buzzword Challenge that I am doing is the Buzzword Reading Challenge. So from the Reading Challenge, 3 books were read in February. That was January and February, and also October, which was pulled for the 25 in 2025 that I wanted to absolutely read, and it was Killer Instinct from October was pulled, and I did read it, so we're going to review that. And then, of course, coming up for March is A Sea of Unspoken Things. How to Survive Your Murder is on this list. So there's only 2 from the Buzzword, the Reading Challenge, that are on my March TBR. Okay, so there's that. Then the other challenge I'm participating in is the bingo challenge. So it's a yearly 25 and 20, 25 and 25. So these are all based on prompts. And as you can see, I have 5 filled in so far. So these were from my readings in January and February. 3 of these we're going to review today, which is Wool, The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, and Hurricane Wars, which I actually soft DNF, but we will talk about that. So going into March, I am going to do my best to fill in as many of these as possible. And in actual fact, quite a few of the books I read in March, but it's going to depend on what I actually read in March, is going to take up these slots. So you will see when we do the March wrap up just how many because I usually pick these when I pick my TBR. So we're going to do it a little bit differently, and I'm going to pick the ones I'm going to fill in at the end of March once the TBR is done. So that's how we're going to do that. So those are all of the challenges that I am participating in. Now, I am super excited to participate in all of them. I will link everything below because I got the challenges off of different people, and I think you can pretty much, especially the bingo challenge, you can pretty much pick that up and start that at any time through the year. Of course, I think you would want to start closer to the beginning of the year because you've got 25 challenges you have to try to fill in, so it's probably best to start as early as possible on that one. And that was from Breeze from 4 Pearls and a Book, who is actually my host for REALMATHON as well, one of the hosts, and one of my favorite YouTubers that I follow all the time. So everything, again, is linked below for that. The other host for my team, I'm on Team Monarchs for REALMATHON, and my other team host is Jen from the Book Refuge, and I follow her all the time. I mean, she is a huge romance reader. That's one of the things I love. She actually does read a little bit of fantasy as well, and but she is mostly romance oriented, and I love to follow her for that reason. So those 2 team members are 2 YouTubers that I follow constantly, and I am excited to be on their team. Okay, so that's it for the readathons. Now, I thought what I would do to start the wrap up is just to quickly go over my, let me close this. I'm just going to quickly go over my reading stats for the month. So I read 14 books in total. 2 were DNFs, so I'll explain those when we get to them. And on average, I had an average star rating of 3.39. Now, when I go through and I review these books, I will not be giving you the star ratings. I decided back last month that I'm just going to review these based on my feelings about them. If you want to see my star ratings, my Goodreads is below, and you can check into that at any time and see. But essentially, I had a pretty good reading month because I did have 3 top tier 5-star and 6 4-stars. So that's pretty good out of 14 books, I think. And the rest were a little bit less than that. I mean, outside of the 2 DNFs, I didn't have anything that went below a 2.5, which meant that I pretty much enjoyed everything that I read this month. So I can't complain. It was a pretty good reading month. And being a short month, I actually read 2 more books than I did in January. And in January, I had a DNF as well. So same thing. But okay. Let's start with the 2 DNFs that I had, and we'll get those out of the way. One of them I'm going to review a little bit more because I did read quite a bit. But we'll start with Hurricane Wars, which is, I did soft DNF this one. So I'm planning to put this on my April TBR. I started it, I think I got to about chapter 6. just wasn't feeling it. Chapter 6 is in about where Alaric's voice comes into it. So it's the two characters, and clearly there's like a war, and Taliesin is the main female character, and she is the one that is basically at the beginning. I just wasn't connecting with the book. And I don't know that it was that I wasn't gonna. I just wasn't feeling it. So it's one of those ones where I think I'm just going to leave it for now, and then I probably will go back. I don't want to leave it too long because I don't want to forget the first few chapters. I mean, I do essentially remember everything that happened, and I want to keep it like that because where I ended off is right where Alaric's voice comes into it. So his first chapter, his first point of view. So we'll leave this one for April and see how it goes where that's concerned. So just a soft DNF for now. The other DNF that I had was Falling into Oblivion. That was an ebook, so I'll put it up here. And I got to about 53% in around there, and just nothing was happening. It's a sci-fi book, and I had expected to enjoy it. It had a bit of a Blade Runner feel to it, which of course was part of the comments that I had seen about it previously. But I just find it didn't come together really great for me. And, you know, at about 53%, I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, well, when is something going to happen? Because nothing much of anything happens leading up to that point. You have a few things here and there, but it's like, what's happening here? So at 53%, I gave up on it. I wasn't enjoying it. Wasn't really, I guess what you would say, I wasn't really enjoying the main character all that much. I thought he was a bit whiny, which I don't know that was necessarily what I was supposed to be thinking about him. So anyway, yeah, gave up on that one. I feel a little sad that I gave up on it, but I did. All right, so what I've got here is, what I've done is I made notes because I'm terrible at remembering the little details. Some of these books I haven't made a ton of notes for, but we're going to go through them one by one and again and give you my best. Now, I would say I'm not the most thorough reviewer, and I might tend to give away tiny spoilers, so I apologize if I do that in advance. But I try not to give anything away that's too big of a giveaway. Okay, so it would never be anything like there's a couple of things that have happened in some of these books that I've read that if I told you, I'd be telling you all of the good stuff, and I don't want to tell you all the good stuff. So I'll stop myself right at that point before I tell you all the good stuff. Okay, so I think I forgot to mention as my stats that, so the things that I did want to include in there was I read 5,420 pages through the month. So now I think that when it does the calculation in the spreadsheet that I have, which I got from Covers with Cassidy, she does this great spreadsheet and it's fantastic. But I think when it adds the books up, it includes the DNFs if you put the DNFs listed with the number of pages in it. So what I did try to do was I tried to just eliminate the, I'm gonna like go back and erase the number of pages for anything that I DNF in the month of March. And I'm gonna keep an eye on that because I think that, you know, I don't want my DNFs in the page count, but I do, like in the case of say, Falling into Oblivion, where I read 53% of the book, I'm going to put in the number of pages that I actually read. So I think that that's a better way to kind of gauge exactly what my total page count was. And then Along with that, I read pretty much almost all the books that I read were categorized as adult, with one young adult, which was Killer Instinct. And then 3 of the books that I read were sci-fi, so obviously, you know, love my sci-fi. And then 4 of them were suspense romance. Now, I did read a regular romance, a fantasy romance, and a paranormal romance as well. That's in there, so I think that's great. I've got thrillers and regular fantasy too, which I think was Hurricane Wars. So anyways, so that's the rest of my stats, which I think I forgot to give you when I mentioned it a little bit earlier. But okay, so let's just get into these reviews, shall we? All right, first one is Rebel Spell. It was an ebook on Kindle, paranormal romance. The 2 main characters are Nova, who's a broken witch, so basically her spells don't work. And then there's Diego, who is a vampire, but he's a new vampire, and he kind of has a chip on his shoulder about that. So there's him. Then there's Nova's friend, bestie, Gianna. I can't remember exactly. I think she's another witch. Could be wrong. Not 100% sure. Cannot recall that because I didn't write it down, which I probably should have. Then there's Sebastian, who's a wolf shifter, and he's a chef. And then there's Lucas, who is a dragon shifter. So those are like the 3 guys. So basically what happens is Nova, she lives in New York, and she gets a call that her aunt died and left her house in Salem. So, and I think technically this is supposed to be Salem, Massachusetts. Could be completely wrong, but I think that's basically how it goes. So, so she knows she has this house, but her aunt was renting 3 roomers, and it's the 3 guys that I just mentioned. So they're rooming in the house, but Nova now owns the house. So, you know, there's a little bit of a, you know, what is she going to do? The guys are thinking, and she's like, what am I going to do about them? So there's a little bit of that. And honestly, I thought it was a cute little book. It was very middle of the road for me. It was nothing, you know, it was not a hard read. It was a really easy read. Somebody dies in it because it is technically a murder mystery romance type thing. And, you know, she's a broken witch, but she's broken for a reason, and there's a reason she does have more powers, and that does come out kind of in the end. I suppose that's a bit of a spoiler, but that does come out, and you know, she kind of figures it all out with Diego's help, and Diego is her love interest. So I thought it was a really cute book. I didn't think it was an earth-shattering, you know, oh my God, such a great romance or anything. No, it was not. Now, it is a series. I think there's 3 or 4 books. Whether or not I continue on in the series remains to be seen. I did not enjoy it that much that I think I would, but then at the same time, one of the characters that I liked the best was Sebastian, and I think the next book, he's in it, and Gianna. I liked the 2 of them, so I think it's their thing in the next book, but we'll see. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to continue with the series. I don't know if I'm going to continue it, but we'll see. And so the next one that we're going to talk about is Someone Like You by Brittney Sahin. Now, some of you may recall, if you've watched my videos before, that Brittney Sahin is one of my favorite suspense romance authors. And from her backlist of books, there were a few that I had not read. And there is a tiny collection of 2 books called the Becoming Us series. And this is book 1, which is about Grace King, and then book 2, which I'm reading in March, is My Every Breath, which is about Kay King, her brother. So, yes, there's just 2 books. Now, the characters that are in her Stealth Ops series, actually do make an appearance in these books, and but then she does that with all of her books. So she basically tries to tie them all together, which I love that. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I really enjoy reading her series, because while they're not always a continuation of everything, the characters make appearances throughout all of the books, which I absolutely love that. So this particular book is about Grace King and Noah. And Noah is a Navy SEAL, and he is getting a divorce and trying to get joint custody of his daughter that he has with this woman, Cindy. And, you know, typical ex-wife who cheated on him while he was deployed. And, you know, yeah. So anyways, there's that. And then Luke and Jessica Scott from Stealth Ops make an appearance because they are, Jessica's actually Grace's friend. Luke knows her too, but, you know, she's very close to Jessica. So they do make an appearance in the book. And now Grace is the daughter of a very wealthy family, and her father is super controlling. They also have a younger brother, Corbin, and Kate is the oldest. Then there's Grace, then there's Corbin. And Grace's father is trying to force her into an arranged marriage with this guy that she doesn't like. A creepy guy. It's kind of a bit of a typical story like that, you know. I mean, she likes Noah right away. She's attracted to Noah right away. But, you know, he doesn't have money. He's just an average guy. And he actually meets her because he is working on her home for his sister. They have a company, and they basically go in and work on homes. So, I mean, essentially he's like a handyman, but, you know, a little bit more skilled than that. So that's basically how they meet. And the thing about this particular book, which is even different from the second book in the series, it feels like there's no high stakes in this. So this kind of really sat middle of the road for me, because it was not at all like her previous romances. It just felt a little lackluster from that point of view. And I think it's because there were no high stakes. Like, Brittney writes suspense romance, and that's what I've come to expect from her. And even the series, The Costa Family, every book there is high stakes in it. So it doesn't matter that they're not all, say, military based or anything like that. It's just that I've kind of come to expect there to be an underlying threat that's happening through the book, whether it be to him or to her or to both of them, because that's kind of how she writes her books. There was nothing like that. I mean, in this particular book, it was, you know, him trying to get custody of his daughter and then finding out some details that he didn't know before. Like, you know, that's like kind of typical. I found the whole thing rather typical. Now, having said that, still like the characters. I liked both of them. I think that the one thing she does kind of really well is develop her two characters. What I found was missing a bit was, like, Noah was talking about his daughter Lily constantly, but she was never on page. Okay, so this child, it was the last 100 pages? I don't even know if it was even that. And then suddenly she makes an appearance for like 2 seconds, and then she's gone again. And I get that it was because he was struggling with the ex-wife, but I think there had to be more depth there, and I kind of missed that a bit. And then on Grace's side, I kind of felt that she needed to stand up to her father, and she kind of didn't. It was just sort of, yeah, I wasn't sure about that relationship and how all of that happened, and that it fit with her. She came off as a little strong at the beginning and then not so strong later on. So it kind of went downhill with her character a little bit towards the end. I guess the threat was her dad, but her dad wasn't really a threat. Yeah, I mean, it just didn't really kind of come off that way either way. But anyway, so that was the next one on the list, and like I did like it, you know, it was solid middle of the road, but most of her books really hit a lot harder than this one did, and this one just kind of didn't really do that. Then the next one that I read was the other cozy mystery. Again, another ebook, so I'll put it up here. It's Beaches, Bungalows, and Burglaries by Kappes, I think. And I liked this one. So this is an example, like Rebel Spell was a cozy murder mystery with a romance. This one didn't have romance, had kind of slight romantic undertones, but it was a great story and it had pretty good characters. You know, it was an entertaining book. Now, I think the series has 20 books. It's like a huge series. And I've already bought the second book. And I think I got the third book off. It was either BookBub or it came through as an Amazon special. And I picked it up because I'll read them in hard or I'll read them in print, or I will read them ebook, either way, but I am going to continue through the series because I really enjoyed this. Now, what I enjoyed about this was the characters, and it had a bit of a comical element to it because the characters were quirky, and I think that really made the book better, in my opinion. It just, she flushed them out so much better. So basically you have this character, Mae West. She is now without any money. So basically she was married to this guy and he basically embezzled money from people. And he went to jail. She didn't, of course, because she didn't have anything to do with it. The FBI figured that out. Once they investigated, they realized she didn't have anything to do with it. But the thing was that he had come to make her dependent on him more or less. Well, she kind of let that happen. And she realized that as things went on, that it was her fault because she let him do that to her. But she didn't love him. So, you know, it was kind of a little bit sad. But what was left to her was this campground in, was it Normal? I think it was called Normal, was the name of the town. And it was, you know, supposed to be a cute little campground. And she was left this RV. And so she took the RV to the campground and she wanted to go see this cute little place and she was going to sell it. I mean, that was, you know, basically her plan. It was in Kentucky. And while she was born and raised in Kentucky, she really didn't want to go back there. But she kind of had no choice, and so off she went. And the people that she meets there, of course, the campground isn't anything like what she thought it was going to be. It's a bloody mess. So, you know, after she meets Dottie and Henry, who take care of the campground and everything, and realize her husband screwed them over too. So she makes it her mission to fix things. And so she gets close to a bunch of people in the town, and Dottie in particular. And the unfortunate side is that they find a dead body in the lake, and it happens to be her ex-husband, Paul, who escaped prison. And she gets off the hook because when he dies, she's not there when it happens. So when they figure out time of death, she was not there when it happened. So she's off the hook. But at first, you know, Hank, the FBI agent, thinks that she might have done it, which of course would be natural. So, you know, it's just kind of how they go through. She decides she's going to be a sleuth detective and Dottie's going to help her, and they're trying to figure out who killed him. And then another body ends up dead in the shed where they had put all her stuff. And, you know, she goes to open it up and voila, dead body. And it was Paul's best friend. So the thing that really got me was I never actually expected what was going to happen. Now, until it happened, more or less. Like when the FBI arrives at the campground, she's there and she's like, what are you guys doing here? More or less, because it's like, I thought I was done with the FBI. And he's like, well, Paul escaped prison. And I'm like, oh, Paul's going to end up dead. You know, so it was one of those. And sure enough, they find the body together. And then I think it was the point where her and Dottie are like, okay, let's go to the shed. Let's go to the storage shed and open them, and thinking they're going to find a dead body. Sure enough, they open it up and they find a dead body. So, but the lead up to that, you had no idea there was a dead body in the shed, because the shed was only mentioned briefly a couple times, you know. So I thought she wrote that really well. And then who the murderer was, no clue. Absolutely no clue. Like, just came out of left field. Completely came out of left field. I did not have any idea who the killer was. So you know what? She did a great job, because I had no idea who the killer was. I mean, I think that if you're reading, even like it's just a short mystery, it's only like 200 pages. What did I put down? 212 pages for that. So, you know, when you're reading something that is that short, she packed a lot in 212 pages, is all I have to say. So, great book, you know, like it's not a 4 or 5 star, but it doesn't have to be to entertain you. And that's kind of how I feel about these sorts of books. It's like, as long as it entertained me and I enjoyed the read, then it did its job. And I am looking forward to moving on to book 2. All right, so next book we're going to move to is Devil Bones by Kathy Reichs. So this is, I think, the 11th book in her series, her mystery thriller series. And again, it's following Temperance Brennan, who is a forensic anthropologist. And she works out of 2 different forensic labs. One is in Montreal, Quebec. But in this particular case, she is in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where her other, so she works out of the 2 labs, and she kind of flies between based on if they need her. So she's working from this particular one, and in this case, they find, they get a call that a plumber finds a skull in a basement. And so she goes to investigate. Now, the thing about this particular book that I found different from some of her other ones was this one was a constant misdirect. So everything was misdirection and sending you off in tangents in different areas, like even her, okay? So one thing that they thought tied to another thing that they thought tied to another thing. And in the end, none of it tied together. It was a very crazy book that way. And I loved that, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. So it ended up, as you go through it, you're experiencing and seeing all of these things, and that you think all these horrible things are happening, and then you find out in the end that it was kind of just all coincidence, more or less. And it was also unique in the sense that I had absolutely no clue who the killer was. None. No clue. Like a lot of times, you know, when you're reading through these books, you can kind of get an inkling of where they're heading with it. Now, you don't always necessarily know who the killer is, because in a lot of cases, you know, you're talking about serial killers, and they might have potential lists of people who they think are your main suspects, but then, you know, it might veer off somewhere else. But in this particular case, not at all. Not even a little bit. It was like the guy who did it was mentioned maybe once or twice, but not even as a suspect. So I was like, wow. It just came out of left field. And I really enjoyed it for that reason. The other thing, this one had an emotional impact. So this is not the first time that she's had someone who is important to the story pass away. And in this particular instance, they're a police officer, and it was very emotional. And that was like, I would say middle of the book, about the middle of the book, and it did drive a lot of how the investigation went from there on. So that was quite impactful, and it was also impactful because this is a character that we have been introduced to previously. Whenever something like that happens, this is not the first time she's done that. I think this maybe third or fourth time she's done that in a book, and I think the last time that happened was my favorite book, one of my favorite books of hers that I've read. This was pretty darn close. It was really good. And I thought that the way that the whole story came together was great. Now, the other thing that is really wonderful about the way that she writes is her characters all have flaws, like serious flaws. And like even to the point where like Temperance Brennan herself, you know, she's an ex-alcoholic. She's in her 40s. You know, she had a daughter at a very young age, and Katie is, you know, just finished college and trying to figure out her life as well. And Temperance has been in sort of an on-again, off-again relationship with a police officer that works with her in Montreal. So, you know, and they all have gray areas, all of them. And I love that because, you know, people aren't perfect. And the other thing that I love, which has been consistent right from book one, is how you get insight into how Temperance's brain works. So how she works through the problems, and she starts connecting all of the things that she's learned about the case throughout, and she starts like kind of building them together and moving them together. And then finally she comes up with a solution that sounds like it makes sense, but she still doesn't quite have it, you know. And that's the reality of how people solve things. I mean, nothing ever comes easy. We have to piece things together to figure out where we're going to head from wherever we've been. So I love the reality in that, and how she kind of makes that all work is one of my favorite things. And that then brings me to her characters. The characters definitely, while the murder is there, the characters drive the story. So you have the murder and you have the plot, and you have the investigation, which those are all key things, but then you have the characters, the strength of those characters. And I love that about all of her books, all of them. Now, in this particular one, there is, it's almost like a learning experience at the end. And there is a statement right at the very end. And I'm going to read the actual line in the book, a couple of lines in the book. Now, this book was written, published in 2008, so quite some time ago. It struck me as how this statement is so completely relevant today. Yeah, it was how the book ended. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this. Okay. Was I to embark on a new beginning with Charlie, with Ryan, with someone new? Could Ryan and I go back and start over again? So, of course, her and Ryan are kind of on a who knows what's going to happen situation. Could America find a new beginning? Could we return to a time when we all felt safe, protected, confident in our values and our purpose, tolerant of customs and belief systems we didn't understand? Charlie, Ryan, Mr. Right, how would my sister Harry put it? No way of knowing which hound will hunt. So it is a very, it's introspective, I guess, in a bit that way, because, you know, I look at that and I think, oh, I've had those thoughts recently about a lot of things that have gone on. So I would say very relevant, but if I had to, I always recommend her books. I would still say you're best to start right at the very beginning. Read the first book and then go on from there. Even though I think, when was the first book published? Might have been before 2000. So these books have been around for quite a long time, and but they're well worth the read going from beginning to, because they're murder mysteries, right? So fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. All right, next book is Chasing Shadows by Brittney Sahin. So this is the 9th book in the Stealth Ops series. I only have one more to go. Yay me. Fantastic series. And this is, the two characters are Roman and Harper. And they've been around throughout for a while. Roman and Harper are both on Echo Team, which is the second team. There's two teams, there's Bravo Team and Echo Team. And I think she's writing a new one, which is Delta Team. That's going to be the new one that's coming out. So super excited for that, because these books are also great. So this one is kind of centers around, I think, a little bit more Roman's family and their ties to, I guess you would call, the Spanish Mafia. I would call them that, more or less. And they are in Barcelona, Spain. They go there. Now, Harper used to work for the CIA. She does not work for them anymore, obviously. She works for Scott Securities, which is they're the people that run these Black Ops teams. And but they go to Barcelona, Spain, because she's contacted by one of her previous CIA assets that she knows. And she's supposed to be meeting him in Spain. And right at the very beginning, like second chapter, there's an explosion. Car explodes as they're going out to meet Ezra, and they don't know if he was in the car or not. They think he was, and as a result of the explosion, a car comes careening towards Harper. Roman pushes her out of the way. He ends up getting hit by the car. And when he pushed her, she hit her head. It was just like chaos, right? Right at the beginning. But they know that something was going on with Ezra. And as with all of her books, this is a suspense romance, okay? Unlike the previous one that I reviewed earlier, this is 100% a suspense. I think that it had all of the elements to it that I would normally look for in one of her books. The thing that kind of brought it down a tiny little bit for me, Roman's family, now not his father, his mother, his sisters, they're all in the US. His father left the Riviera family because he did not like the things that they did in Spain. And his uncle wants Roman to join him to head the family and is almost blackmailing him to do this. Now, there's a lot more involved in that, but I don't want to say too much because it would actually give quite a bit away. But the one part of it that frustrates me, and she does do this quite a bit in her books, but in this particular case, there's a real reason this bothers me. And this is that Roman is a ex-Navy SEAL. Basically all the guys that are part of Scott and Scott Securities and these teams are all ex-Navy SEALs. But, you know, they all know each other. And these guys become like brothers. They're very, very, very close. They also, they depend on each other in the worst situations you could possibly imagine. But in this case, Roman doesn't tell them about his family and come on. Like, this is exactly the sort of thing that they take care of, okay? They figure this shit out and they know how to work, like, yeah. So when he finally does tell them, they're upset that he hasn't told them. And I don't blame them for being upset, because he should have told them, because it affects his relationship with Harper, because they've been kind of dancing around each other through a bunch of different books until you get to this book, right? And she thinks that she's also hiding stuff, and all of that comes out. But that has to do with her position with the CIA. So there's a lot of things she can't say because she worked as an operative for the CIA. So, you know, I understand her situation a lot more than his, frankly, okay? She cannot say anything till she's given the okay to say something. And then she does. She basically tells him, yeah, a little bit of that whole miscommunication thing, and the I'm hiding this from you. And, you know, it was like that angsty love that they were together and then they weren't together. Drives me crazy. But anyway, I love both characters, and I was waiting for this romance because, you know, they've been building to it. And the last book before this one really, really like kind of dug in, because you knew this was coming, right? But it kind of really dug in to what was going on with the two of them. I loved it. I thought it was a great ninth book. And the last book is Finn's story. So I will, of course, be looking forward to that. And in particular, because Julia, who is his love interest going into that one, she's a sister of Michael Maddox, who's from the Hidden Truth series. So again, she ties all these people together. Friggin' love it. Now, I did want to mention the one thing. So it's right at the end of the book. So there's a little tiny spoilery. Not really, because it's not giving away the meat of the story. But at the very end of the book, you know, they're flying home. And when the transport lands and they get off, all of their family, because all the guys are married now, except for Finn, and of course Rowan's with Harper, and all of the wives and the kids, and one of the team members who had to stay behind, they're all there waiting for them. And it is such a lovely moment. You know, it's just, you can feel the emotion in the moment. And I was like, oh, what a great way to end it. Like, it was just fabulous. I loved that so much. So anyways, wanted to mention that. Again, another fantastic story from Brittney Sahin. Now, I'm not finished with her. We have 2 more coming up from her. So just hang on to your horses. All right, so the next 2 books that I read were both ebooks, and they were both, again, Brittney Sahin, and they were the next 2 in the Hidden Truths series. So one was The Hard Truth, and the other one was Surviving the Fall. So I'll put them both up here on either side. So we're going to go over The Hard Truth first. Now, these are books 3 and 4. Okay, and I still have one more, and that one is now in my Kindle Unlimited, sitting, waiting to get read. So that will actually finish off the series for The Hidden Truth. This particular one, The Hard Truth, was, again, it's a romantic suspense, and the characters are Connor Matthews and Olivia Taylor are the 2 main characters. Now, Connor is friends with Michael Maddox from the first book and Aidan O'Connor from the second book. And these guys are just kind of all friends, and when they need each other, they come together. Now, what Connor does for a living is he's basically a bodyguard, and he also takes care of things like the last mission he was on. He went in to Mexico and rescued a young girl who had been kidnapped. So there is a lot of, he does a lot of that stuff. I mean, obviously he has a military background, but, you know, he's been out of the military for quite some time. That's what he does for a living. Now, his father dies. So he gets a call when he gets back from this last assignment that his father has passed away. And he has a brother, Mason, who is still in the military. He is Special Forces, and he has 6 months left on his contract, so he can't leave. So Connor basically accepts that he'll take over the company for the 6 months until Mason can come back, because Connor wants nothing to do with his father's company. Doesn't want anything to do with his dad. They had not a great relationship. And a lot of that comes to light that it has to do with Olivia Taylor. So this is a second chance romance. But Olivia is working for a guy by the name of Declan Reed. And it appears that Connor's father heads business dealings with this Declan guy. And clearly this Declan guy is not a good dude. And you find out very early on that Olivia is actually FBI. So, yeah, so there's that. And it's kind of an interesting dynamic because she's undercover and she thinks Connor's company and his dad and all that were crooked. And Connor thinks she's working for a crooked guy. So obviously there's miscommunication there, which, you know, is one of the things Brittney's good at. But in this particular case, it makes sense, right? Because they're not telling each other 100% the truth. And a lot of that is because the lack of trust that they have from when they were young and what happened when they were young and they were together. So, and the reason they parted was also misunderstanding. And a lot of that was created because of his father. So you have all of that, and it actually tied together quite nicely. I mean, I really did enjoy the book. It wasn't a super long book. You know, it's 380 pages. Her books typically, they can sometimes get a little bit longer, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that because they are suspense romance novels, they typically can have really intricate storylines. Like, she actually does a fantastic job of building to the climax in all of her books, and a lot of details happen within those books. So I always enjoy that in every aspect of them. So I can't complain, and this book was no different. So I did, you know, it had its set of twists and turns. I mean, all of Brittney's romances are spicy, but typically you don't get a lot of spice at the beginning of the books. Her books tend to lead into it, which I always appreciate because it tends to happen a little bit more naturally. And I do find that her books do tend to happen a little bit more naturally. And I like the suspense of the stories. I think she's maybe only written a couple of books that it's been like instant attraction, you know? And even then, it worked really well. She wrote the characters really well, and it worked really well. And it was never easy. I mean, none of them are ever easy because, you know, it's suspense romance, so it's never easy. Anyway, so that was that one. And then the next one was Surviving the Fall. So this one was a crazy ride. Okay, really, really loved this one. This was Jake Summers, who is, again, part of the group of friends, and he's an FBI counterterrorism agent, and Alexa Ryan, who is MI6. So obviously, you know, she's working undercover for MI6. And so there's FBI and MI6 agents on either side, and The only thing that kind of brought this down a little tiny bit is it has the amnesia trope in it, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I've had it like Chasing Shadows, which I just reviewed, which is a different series than this one. It also had a tiny bit of the amnesia trope for both Roman and Harper, because they both hit their heads in that accident right at the very beginning. But it wasn't full-blown amnesia. It was actually the type of thing that you would expect because of their injuries. And it was just a matter of that they felt shaken up. In this particular case, Jake actually loses his memory all the way back to the point that he is in college, I think. I think it was college, I think. And so and of course, there is a looming terrorist threat, and they know Jake has that knowledge in his head. So it's a bit frustrating from that point of view. Alexa and Jake had met a year before this all takes place. And so she knows him, he doesn't know her. But he kind of feels like she's familiar, which is, of course, of course he does. And so what happens at the very, very beginning of the book is there is an explosion. So he is obviously being held somewhere, and he is trying to get away from them. And he has grabbed a suicide vest. It has explosive material in it. And he basically sets off a bomb. And he kind of escapes, but he escapes with injuries. And of course, he's found, bomb goes off, all hell breaks loose, and he's found, and he ends up in a London hospital. And he ends up in a London hospital with no memories. And the FBI is there, and they're trying to, initially they want them to think that he's dead, that he died in the explosion. But, it all comes to light very quickly that he didn't die. But Alexa goes in because she's told to by her superior at MI6, see if this guy knows it, if it's connected to the case that she's working on. Initially, they don't think so, but then they realize that it is. So it all kind of ensues from there. And they sort of have to backtrack because they know where he was and where he was supposed to be and what he was supposed to be doing before he ended up in this abandoned factory in London. Because that wasn't where he was. He had been in Spain. So there's, obvious connection there. I always love how she sort of weaves everything in together about the characters. And I loved how there was sort of a fling between the two of them, and they didn't know. She didn't know he was FBI, and he didn't know she was MI6. They just were together because they liked each other. And that does all kind of come into play as he gets his memories back. And now that is sort of the other thing, is like he just, boom, he gets all his memories back. And I'm like, why did we go through all of this? Like, it just was kind of, I don't like the amnesia trope. So it ruined what was otherwise, shouldn't say ruined. Ruined's not a good word. It put a dent in what was otherwise a really great book. Okay, so that was it for that one. Okay, so next in our in the review is Mile High by Liz Tomforde. This particular book, so this is the first in the, is it the Windy City series? I think it is. And my first book of hers I've ever read, so I've never read any of hers, and it's a contemporary romance. Now, I enjoyed it. I would not put this up there with the suspense romances I read, but I definitely lean towards those. Anyway, the other thing is this is a hockey romance, and I typically don't like sports romances, but I've read a couple over the last little while. Like I read two Payne and Corinne ones, and they're younger university, and I actually really liked both of those. Unsteady and Unloved, loved both those books and thoroughly enjoyed them. So I would say this sits right in there with them. I did really like this one. Just wouldn't put it up there with a suspense romance because those are always a little bit better to me. But so this follows Stevie Shea, and she is a flight attendant on the plane for the NHL team jet. And on the team is Evan Zanders, who is the main character. And he's arrogant and he's a bit of an ass. You know, all of that typical sort of thing. And of course, him and Stevie butt heads right at the very beginning on the first flight. So it's quite comical, little childish on his part, okay, because she's like not having any of his shit, you know. And the thing is, she's used to dealing with athletes because her brother, Ryan, is a professional basketball player. But she doesn't basically go around telling people that because she wants them to like her for her, not for her brother, so to speak, because that's what she's dealt with all her life, right? And so the thing that I really like about how Tomforde builds the characters is the two of them both have confidence issues. Xander's, it's like he feels like he can't care about anybody. It's like it's this wall he puts up. And with Stevie, she has a lack of confidence in herself that stems from how her mother treats her and just, you know, how she's kind of just always not had really great friends because of her brother. Nothing her brother's done directly. Her brother loves her. And her brother's always her biggest supporter. And so, funny enough, that's who she happens to live with is her brother, because he's like, no, you don't need to get an apartment. You come and live with me. I'm not home all the time. I have this huge place, condo. You live with me. Well, it just so happens that his condo is across the street from Xander's. Of course it is. Okay. So there's all of that. And overall, I thought that the book flowed fairly well. Now, one of the things that I thought kind of fell off a little for me was that the romance, the spicy part between the two started a bit too soon. I think it was around page 100. It's a 488 page book. Started too soon for the two of them. So the sexual element came into play just a bit too early. It's like the chase was done and we're having sex and that's it, you know. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. The other thing that bothered me was I felt the book didn't have to be 488 pages. So like there were certain things in there. She repeated herself multiple times. Like one of the things that I noted was he mentioned and explained more than once about how he and his best friend Madison, how they signed to the team and how they came to be on the team together and how they were playing together. That happened like minimum 3 times, maybe 4. I don't know. And I'm like, what, she's explaining this again? Like you don't have to explain all that again, okay? I found that a little frustrating in the book. To me, it's like you tell the story once and then you allude to it if you need to bring it up again, because you've already told the story in full once, okay? So she does that a few times. Now, I really loved all of the other characters. I loved Eli Madison. I liked his wife, Logan. She was great. And their daughter, Ella, super adorable. So, you know, and even like her brother, Ryan, was fantastic. She has, now Xander has a sister, Lindsay, who she's really great. even the freaking dog. There's a dog in the story, Rosie. Xander adopts her, but Xander adopts her because of Stevie. That's Stevie's passion. Stevie works with a small shelter, and that's her passion. And Rosie is like the sweetest, but she's a Doberman, and nobody wanted to adopt her. And it's just like, as soon as he adopts her, it's like you love her, love him forever because he adopted the dog. So it's really great. And Ella, Eli and Logan's daughter, has a great connection with Rosie as well. So it's super sweet. So, I mean, you know, when it comes right down to it, it was a good book. Great characters and a good story. And quite frankly, I'm very much looking forward to carrying on to the next book, because I think that I'm going to enjoy it. I've actually heard that this one's not the best one in the series, and I'm like, well, I enjoyed this one, so I am expecting that I will very much like the next ones coming up. So, and I think I have the next three. And I think, sure, her last one's coming out this year, the last one in the series. So we'll have to pick that up once I'm done the other ones, though. I will finish the other ones first. But yeah, so pretty good to me. All right, so next on our list is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Again, another solid read, sci-fi based. It was a bit of a surprise to me. Like, I had read the synopsis of it, but the synopsis really kind of doesn't give you the whole feeling of the book, obviously, you know, because that would give it away, and you don't want to give it away. So, but basically, it's this guy Jason Desson, and he right at the very beginning, you know, a married man. He's got a teenage son, and his wife Daniela and his son Charlie. So that's the three of them. He has what he thinks of as a very satisfying life, but he did give up a lot, because he had been a scientist, and he had quite a future, and he more or less gave that up for his wife and his son. Now, he ends up going to a bar to meet up with a friend who is celebrating a success, and you know, on his way home, he's kidnapped. That's where things get weird, and this kidnapper basically knocks him out. And when he comes to in more or less a hospital room, and people know who he is, but he doesn't know any of the people in the room. So he cannot recall what they're trying to get him to remember. And essentially, it's because he's the wrong Jason, right? Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. It's actually very early in the book that you figure out that he's not the person they think he is, okay? Hopefully this doesn't have too much spoilers. But essentially, the idea is that he goes into this box and he is able to travel to alternate realities, is what it is. And it doesn't take long for the reader, as a reader, for you to realize who kidnapped him. I'm not going to say, but you realize who kidnapped him. And like, it's hard to say much of anything without giving too much of it away, but he wants to try to get back to his family. So that's the idea of where he's going with it. And he has some help from somebody in the new place that he ends up in. There's a whole bunch of things that lead up to him going and doing this and searching. He escapes this place, and he ends up kind of on the run in a very weird fashion. So that's what the book comes down to. Now, I mean, it's a very simple plot, but it keeps you intrigued all the way through. There were a few things that I thought were kind of predictable. Like, I mean, it didn't take me long to figure out who had kidnapped him, because to me, that was like the most logical thing ever. And then I did find at one point, which I think is a natural thing that was going to happen, is that you end up with many versions of himself. And that I found a little confusing. And that's simply because you're trying to track all these versions. So that was really, really hard. But loved how the book ended. Basically, the premise of the story is kind of like a situation where if you could go, what if I did this, or what if I did that, or what if I did that, and then you could go into your life to see where all those what ifs ended up. That's the premise of the story. And I thought that it was fascinating, really, because we all think that. I think at any one given time in our lives, we think about, what if I had done something different, right? Because where would your life have had, where would it have ended up if you had done this different thing with your life? And that, to me, is the whole basis of the book. And I loved the ending. Absolutely loved it. Not going to say why I loved it, because that would totally give it away. But I would highly recommend this to anybody who likes a psychological thriller. I wouldn't even call it a thriller. It's a thrilling story in how that it progresses and everything, but I wouldn't call it a thriller. I would call it more of like it is definitely true sci-fi. I mean, it's a brain tug. So loved it for that reason. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about my 3 favorite books from the month. I had three. They were top tier for me. And I'm going to go from, I guess you could say, my least favorite to my favorite of the 3. But they were all like best reads. So the first one is Wool by Hugh Howey. This is the kind of book that, as a sci-fi reader, it's fascinating. But it's also got like so much of the human element to it, which I really, really liked. Very dystopian, I think, in how it's written. But, the idea is that everyone lives in a silo below ground because they can't live above ground because it's toxic. How it got that way, we don't know how it got that way. None of that is discussed in this book. Some of it's alluded to a little bit, but none of it is clearly discussed in this book. The thing that fascinated me was how the whole silo operated, all the different levels, how many levels. So this would be almost like taking, I can't even imagine the size of this thing. It had to be massive. I don't even know what the population of the actual silo itself was, but there are thousands of people in this silo, thousands. So we're not talking small. This is like taking a small town, probably of 100,000, and stuffing them in a silo. Okay. Like the mechanics is on the 150th floor down. That's how big this thing is. And I found that fascinating. The other thing about it is how the society works. So the story basically starts off with someone being sent to their death, and being sent to your death is being sent outside. They know you're not going to make it. The idea is that they put a suit on you to see how long you'll last, and that they're improving these suits to see if you can last longer. And I guess, I don't know what the initial thought is. The thought is that, can you survive outside in one of these suits, then come back in? Like, there's all this sort of idea to it. And but the idea is that you're going out to clean. So it's a cleaning. And you go out to clean the visual sensors so everybody can still see what's going on. I think it's really it is very dystopian and very gruesome, okay? This all happens at the beginning of the book, so I'm not giving a lot away. The guy who's going out is the sheriff. So essentially, you cannot express that you want to go outside. You can't express any interest in outside. You can't talk about it. You can't. The minute you do, they're sending you out. So it's very judgmental society, okay? But it is also a form of control, very much so. And this is obvious early on in the book, that this is how they're controlling people, and that there have been rebellions that have occurred at different instances, and they're trying to stop that from happening. Now, you do wonder, and I mean, I did wonder right from the beginning. I'm thinking, is this all that's left of society? You do come to find out, no, that's not all that's left of society. But it's very in a roundabout sort of fashion. And the other thing is that people are dropping dead like flies in this book. So, you've got the sheriff who dies right at the beginning, because he goes out to clean in this suit that doesn't last, and he dies. And everything he experiences, it's a little confusing at the beginning, but then once you read through the book, you're thinking, oh, I know what the hell these people are doing. And it's pretty crazy. And there are like a few key people. So like the mayor ends up dead. The deputy sheriff, he ends up dead. Another guy who, now Juliet is the one who is asked to be sheriff by the mayor and the deputy sheriff. She accepts the job, and within 5 days, she's basically being sentenced to her death. I mean, it is insane how this whole thing works. But it all plants little seeds along the way as you're going through. So there are some slow parts. I mean, it's a long book. It's almost 600 pages. Oh my, 571 pages. So it's not a short read, but as you're going through it, you kind of think to yourself, just the thought of living in this silo gave me claustrophobia. Okay, I freaked me the hell out. And then to think they're going to put the suit on you and send you out there to die. Yeah, it was freaky. It's very political. So a lot of what goes on in the book centers around, obviously, a political structure. I mean, if you don't like political structures, then this definitely would not be the kind of book that you would want to read. I think that the human element of the book is kind of what that's always the sort of thing that keeps me going. And if it's really well written, then it's great. And it ends in a freaking cliffhanger, more or less. Okay. You're like, what the hell are they going to do now? Now, there are 2 other books. What are they? I got them. They're just up here. Shift and Dust. So there are 2 other books to this series, and I absolutely 100% will be continuing on and reading the rest of the series. I've heard some reviews have said that the other 2 books are not as good as the first book. But I've read the synopsis on both of them and thought, well, they still sound like I want to know what happens. You want to know. I want to know how they ended up this way. 100% want to know that. So it's like, yeah, got to read the next 2 books. So they'll be on the list. Okay. Next one of my favorites was Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So it's the second book in the Natural series, and I really enjoyed this book. Now, I think that the first one, I sat a little around 4 stars for me. So, it was a pretty good book. This one was by far much, much better. And I think maybe part of that is because I was very much invested in the 5 teenagers, once you've read the first book and you've gone through everything that they went through, particularly Cassie, Michael, and Dean, then you come into this book and those relationships develop so much more. And I really loved how they brought that all together. I got a lot more in this book of Sloane and Leah, who were the 2 other characters, and also Leah's relationship with Dean, which was much more explored in depth in this book, which I really liked. She introduced a new character, Agent Veronica Sterling, and Veronica was FBI. And what did I say here? So she's Director Sterling's daughter, okay? And she's Briggs's ex-wife. They had been married. They were both involved in the search for Dean's father, who was a serial killer. Okay, so that's like where kind of things go with Dean. And Dean was the first of the Naturals in the Naturals program. And when his father was caught, I think Dean was 12 years old. So it was a pretty tough time for him. And Veronica had a lot to do with Dean's life. But then she left and she went to Homeland Security, but now she's back. So she's back and she is there because of what happened previously in the first book. So she's basically there to evaluate the program, kind of. But she has a much deeper interest because she really cares about them. I mean, she really does care about them. There's all of that. So the character development is much heavier in this book, but I also think that you're much more invested in it because you've already been through book one, right? So you have more ties to these characters because you're kind of invested in how things went with them. Now, the idea in this book is that there are murders occurring and they relate back to his father, okay? So at a certain point, Dean has to go to the prison to visit his father, and I can't recall exactly why, but Cassie has to go with. I think she's going for emotional support, and Briggs and Dean go in while Cassie and Veronica wait outside, but they end up being ushered in for some reason. I can't remember exactly what the reason for that was. Yeah, it's all kind of really weird. And then at one point, Dean's father demands that he wants to see the girl, meaning Cassie. And they question, how did he know? And I'm like, I know. So there was a tiny little bit there that was, I saw it coming, okay? And then once you kind of get your hand on that, then you really do sort of know where the story's going to go from there. But that was it. That was the only thing that was kind of glaringly obvious to me. I really liked in this book how they worked more as a team, how some of the history of how the Natural program started and the involvement of Sterling and Briggs in it. Also, Judd Hawkins, who's kind of like their caretaker. He's the older man that's always there, and how he's involved in it, and his daughter was involved in it, and how that all transpired. I loved how all of that was written. So thoroughly enjoyed this book. And I honestly can't wait to dig into the next one in the series. And both of the last two, All In and Bad Blood, I think Bad Blood's next, I can't remember, but those two are on my 25 must-reads for 2025. So they will get read at some point through the rest of the year. I mean, I might just pick them up and start reading them because, I don't want to forget the details of what happened in the first two books. And I think I read the first one in December. So, yeah, loved this book. And we are down to the final book in the series. So the last book that I want to talk to you about is my favorite read for February, which is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Loved this book. Totally loved it. I actually, this was way above even 5 stars, 6 stars. This was fabulous. I bought the book hoping it would be good, but I wasn't really sure. The reason that I wasn't really sure is because it's historically based. So, and I'm not usually a historical based type person, but I had hopes because it had fantastical elements to the story. So, I was really kind of hoping that I was going to like it. I liked the idea of Amina being an older character, and she was a pirate and all that sort of thing. So I loved all of that. Now I'm going to apologize before we get started further into this. I'm going to butcher some of these names, 100%, okay? Because some of them I'm looking at and I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce those, but I'm going to do my best, okay? Anyway, so how it starts off is Amina has, basically she's retired. I think she hasn't been on a ship in 10 years, and she's raising her daughter out in the middle of nowhere with her mom and her brother and all that sort of thing. And this older lady comes to visit who is clearly wealthy, basically offers Amina a shit ton of money to go and find her kidnapped daughter. At least that's the story she tells her. Amina finds it really hard to say no, especially because the money that she's being offered could set up her whole entire family for their lifetime. And I think that, that's hard to say no to. But she also, I think, she doesn't want to leave her daughter. And she's not young. She's like 40, I believe, in the story. So, she's going back to a life that she hasn't been involved in 10 years. But she says, I'll investigate and then I'll get back to you. So she tells her mom, she takes off, and mom's not happy. Her mother's not happy about this, but Amina just feels like it's hard to say no to this. And the first thing she does is she goes and she looks for, I guess, her best friend. Delilia is her best friend. And Delilia is a character. I believe she's like sort of a master of poisons, that kind of idea. And she was on the ship with them. And then her and Delilia go to the city. I can't remember the name of the city offhand. And they go to look for Tinbu, who has her ship. Okay. And the ship's called Marawati, I think is how it's pronounced. And that's the ship. And Tinbu's basically been looking after it. And when she gets there, they get there at the point where Tinbu's crew has been arrested for some sort of theft and treason. They're being hauled away to jail, and her ship is being boarded by the military in this cove area where the city is. And so her and Delilia decide that they're going to break out Tinbu and his crew and steal the ship back. Chaos ensues, but it works. They get the ship back and they get the hell out of there. Just how the whole thing is written, I really love it. What really builds all of this is Amina's character. Amina is a definite gray area character with heart. So it kind of has both. She carries guilt because she has guilt for things that she thinks that she's done. But at the same time, she understands that the reason she made those choices there was a good reason she made those choices. And all of that actually comes into play on how all of this happens, right? And it also ends up that the 16-year-old daughter who is missing isn't necessarily kidnapped. So they find that out. And Salima, the grandmother, tries to blackmail Amina more. I mean, it's crazy. But Amina sets off with her crew to try to find this girl. And in the interim, they find the husband she thought was dead because she left him for dead. And he's a demon, but they have no choice but to take him with them. And there is some comical moments and he's a bit of an odd character too, definitely weird. And there's like sorcery and all kinds of things like that along the trip, and things that attack them in the ocean. And then there is one point in the book, I think it's kind of spoilery if I say it, but basically Amina ends up on an island, a bunch of fantasy type creatures. Initially, I'm thinking, that kind of doesn't fit with the story. So that was about the only thing where I was kind of like, that doesn't fit with the story. But then you see where it actually does fit with the story. And it actually does build the story quite a bit. So I loved this, okay? It just surprised me that I liked it as much as I did. And I loved the, also the history that she built into it of obviously Muslims in the Persian Empire and all of like the Mediterranean area. I mean, I think this is kind of like supposed to be 13th century, so quite a long time ago because it's all pirates and that type of thing on the ocean. Yeah, so it was, I loved the history she put into it, even though she did bend the history a little bit. But overall, it was really a fantastic read. I would recommend it to anybody. Now, I know this is her earlier book. So and I mean, in the way she left it off that she could write more books based on Amina's character, based on how the book ended. You wouldn't necessarily have had to read this. It would be best if you read this, but I think they could each be separate stories. If she did it the right way, it could be really cool. So, yeah, that's kind of how she left it off. Anyways, what I was going to say is that I did get City of Brass, which was her previous series, which is Egyptian based. I really am looking forward to reading that. I think there's 3 books in the series. I only got the first one, but yeah, there's 3 books in the series. So very much looking forward to that. See, I like fantasy books, but I do really tend to prefer urban fantasy. I've come to realize that that's kind of like really my thing. I liked just how the whole thing was portrayed and how she was portrayed and just how it was written. And the thing is, the other thing I did want to mention about this, and it was something that I found really cool. Initially, you come to realize as you're going through the book that Amina is relating the tale of her life to a journalist, a writer, like a bard, that like she's telling somebody her life. So Amina is narrating the book, but you get bits and bobs in between where the writer interjects like a page somewhere in it, like, you know, or you get like a historical thing, like something like this. Okay, so this isn't a chapter. This is just literally like a couple of pages of something that the writer is interjecting. And then at the end of the book, you find out who the writer is. So I was like who she's telling her story to. I loved that. I absolutely loved that. Like, yeah, wow. So good. Yeah. Okay. So that was it. That is all of my books for February. There's a lot of books, right? Now, like I said, I did my TBR for March for the Realmathon 4.0. I will link that video below because it's going to be a really fun read. Again, I'm on Team Monarchs, so we'll see how our team does against all of the others. I know we don't have as many people on our team, but the way that Cassidy created this, it's a weighted average, so it doesn't matter how many team members you do or don't have. It's all weighted based on you know, how we attack or how we gain points. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to share that wrap up. Now, I might actually do a mid-month wrap up. We'll see how that goes. Depends on how far I am. Like if I feel that I've only read, I'm expecting to read of the 25 books, about 15 of them. That would probably be my top number. I can't see myself reading any more than that. but I wanted to give myself options, you know, trade in and out. And obviously I have a lot of e-options as well as print options. So we'll see how it goes from there. And I will, you know, keep you informed on how it goes. The other thing I'm considering doing is maybe doing some vlogs, even though I'm not really, not a vlogger on how my reading goes. I might for this month, just simply because it's just a tag. Now, this video is going up on the 3rd of March, but again, I'll put the links below for Cassidy's video on REALMATHON, because you can join at any time through the month of March, because, you know, you can add to your team no matter when you start reading. So even if it's, you know, a week or two into it and you feel like you want to participate a little bit, or even like if you think that you might want to join a team and maybe you're not going to read a lot, but you know, you'll read enough books that you want to add to it. So I would say definitely 100% join a team. Again, I'm Team Monarchs, which is a fantastic team. So would love to see you join us and add to our points. But either way, I guess I will see you in the next video, which I think is probably going to be a book haul. Because I've been collecting them for a few months, and I have quite a few because I had my birthday selections, and then Book Outlet just had to have another freaking sale. It was a Valentine's Day sale, so I had to take part in that. Of course I did. All right, we will see you in the next video.